There is a lie you have been told since the day you were born, quietly whispered by teachers, parents, and managers who needed you to stay manageable. The lie is that if you keep your head down, do the work, and wait your turn, your value will eventually be recognized. Think about the last time you sat in a meeting room or at a crowded table. You watched someone with half your intelligence and a fraction of your competence completely dominate the conversation. They spoke without apologizing. They claimed the space. And to your quiet disgust, everyone in the room naturally deferred to them while you sat there in silence, waiting for the perfect moment to prove you were better. You are waiting for a permission slip that does not exist. Let us break down exactly why that happens. You have been conditioned to believe that humility is a virtue and that taking up space is a sin. So, you play by the rules. You build your skills in private. You craft the perfect argument in your head. You tell yourself that the quality of your work should speak for itself. But human nature is deeply, inherently primal, and the human brain is ruthlessly efficient. People do not have the time, the energy, or the bandwidth to dig through your polite silence to discover the hidden gold inside you. They are not scanning the room for quiet potential. They are scanning the room for authority. And authority is never handed out based on merit. It is assumed. This is the unspoken dynamic of every modern workplace, every campus, and every social hierarchy you will ever navigate. The person who commands the room is rarely the smartest person in the room. They're simply the one who decided they belonged at the head of the table before anyone invited them to sit down. While you are busy calculating whether you have the right to speak, they are already steering the ship. You view this as a flaw in the system. You think the world is blind, superficial, and unfair. But the world does not weigh your worth. It measures your certainty. That is the velvet line, the operating system of the fraction of people who actually control their reality. The world does not weigh your worth. It measures your certainty. The longer you wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder and crown you, the longer you will remain invisible. The people who are actively bypassing you in life, getting the promotions, holding the attention of the room, taking the opportunities you know you deserve, are not outworking you. They are simply out-signaling you. They understand that reality is highly subjective and that people will accept whatever version of yourself that you confidently project. If you project hesitation, they will treat you like an amateur. If you project absolute, unapologetic competence, they will assume you are a master. You call your silence being humble. You call it being respectful, being observant, being realistic. But let us be ruthlessly honest about what it really is. It is fear. It is the fear of taking a position and having it challenged. It is the fear of being perceived as an imposter. You dress this fear up in the polite clothing of waiting for the right moment, but the result is exactly the same. You become a background character in your own life, serving as an audience member for people who had the audacity to act like they were the main event. Machiavellian strategy strips away these comforting illusions. It looks at human interaction not as we wish it to be, but as it actually is. To master this game, you must violently reject the idea that you need to be discovered. You must accept that your internal reality means absolutely nothing until you force the external world to deal with it. You must construct a presence so unshakable that the room has to recalibrate itself to your temperature. But the game is not rigged against your talent. It is rigged against your hesitation. To kill that hesitation, you must first understand that the mind does not lead the body. The body instructs the mind. You have been taught that confidence is a mystical feeling that magically arrives after you achieve success, but that is a formula for perpetual paralysis. Watch the physical mechanics of a man who actually owns the space he occupies. When he walks through the door of a crowded networking event or steps into a high-stakes meeting, he does not rush. His pace is unhurried, almost dangerously slow. He does not scan the room with darting, anxious eyes, looking for a friendly face to anchor him. His gaze is steady, horizontal, resting precisely wherever he chooses to place it. He takes up space. His shoulders are wide, his movements are deliberate, and he does not unconsciously fold his arms, cross his legs tightly, or shrink into himself to apologize for his physical existence. Watch how the people around him react. They instinctively step aside. They adjust their own posture in response. They naturally defer, not because they know his resume, not because they have verified his credentials, but because their primal instincts recognize a superior physical architecture. The human brain is an ancient pattern recognition machine. Long before language was invented, we assessed power through physical geometry. That wiring has not changed just because we wear suits and stare at screens. When you walk into a room, the subconscious minds of everyone present evaluate your status within milliseconds. If your physical geometry signals submission, they will treat you like a subordinate, no matter what your job title says. This is where the dark psychology of power begins. Most people treat confidence as if it were an unpredictable emotion, waiting for the weather in their brain to clear up before they decide to step forward. But champions do not wait to feel confident. They construct the physical posture of a champion, and they force their nervous system to obey. When you deliberately slow your movements, deepen your breathing, and hold a neutral, unblinking gaze, you are not just signaling dominance to the room. You are sending a direct chemical command to your own brain. You are artificially lowering your cortisol. You are altering your biological state. You are hacking the hardware that dictates your emotional reality. The world does not weigh your worth, it measures your certainty. And certainty is entirely physical. The moment you act with absolute, unyielding physical presence, the feeling of imposter syndrome begins to starve to death. Society tells you to fake it until you make it. That is weak advice for weak people. Pretending is fragile. It is a mask that shatters the moment someone puts pressure on it. The Machiavellian player does not pretend. He initiates. You are not faking a reality. You are initiating one. You are laying down the physical blueprint of the man you intend to be, knowing with absolute cold logic that the psychology will inevitably follow the physiology. Think about the micro-submissions you engage in every single day. Do you walk into your office quickly, head down, avoiding eye contact so you will not have to engage? When you sit across from someone intimidating, do you nervously tap your foot or nod your head excessively to show you are listening? Every single time you execute one of these anxious behaviors, you're actively training your brain to feel small. You are literally programming your own inferiority. It is time to treat your posture as a weapon. How you sit, how you stand, how you breathe, these are the levers of power that are entirely within your control, regardless of how much money is in your bank account or what your current social status happens to be. When you choose to take up space without apology, you force the environment to mold itself around you. The next time you walk into a room where you feel outclassed, do not try to think positive thoughts. Positive thinking is useless static in the face of adrenaline. Instead, slow down, drop your shoulders, look directly at the center of the room and simply exist there. Let them feel the weight of your physical presence before a single introduction is made. Yet standing tall is only half the equation. The real test comes the moment you open your mouth. You have mastered your physical architecture, but the moment you open your mouth, you risk tearing the entire structure to the ground. True presence is not just about how you stand, it is about how you wield the silence that follows. Picture yourself in a high-stakes scenario. Perhaps you have just pitched a major idea to your team, stated a non-negotiable boundary in a modern relationship, or named your premium price to a new client. You deliver the line perfectly. But then, the other person does not respond immediately. They just look at you. The silence stretches for 1 second, then 2, then 3. The tension becomes thick. Panic sets in. Your heart rate spikes. And what do? You break. You start talking. You explain your reasoning. You add a nervous, self-deprecating laugh. You offer a preemptive concession, a justification, a softer alternative. You flood the quiet space with words, frantically trying to ease the discomfort and make the other person smile. You tell yourself you are just being clear, polite, and cooperative. But here is the cold dagger of reality you must accept. The issue is not that the world undervalues you, or that you have bad luck with dominant personalities. It is the signals you are actively broadcasting and the incentives you are creating. Every extra word that leaves your mouth after you have made your point is a surrender of power. Your instinct to explain yourself is not communication. It is a covert plea for validation. You are begging the room to tell you that you are allowed to ask for what you just asked for. In any social dynamic, the person who speaks the most is almost always the person with the lowest status. The subordinate chatters to entertain, to justify, to placate. They treat their life story and their reasoning as cheap currency, handing it out to anyone who will listen. The master, however, speaks only to command, and then lets the silence do the heavy lifting. When you over-explain, you are broadcasting a desperate insecurity. You are signaling that you do not believe your own words carry enough weight to stand on their own. Silence is a void, and human beings are psychologically terrified of voids. We are wired to fill them. When you say less than necessary, you weaponize that terror. You become opaque, unreadable, and deeply unpredictable. People cannot manipulate someone they cannot read, and they cannot read a man who gives them nothing but steady eye contact and a closed mouth. By withholding the nervous chatter, you force the other person to project authority onto you. You force them to do the emotional labor of the interaction. This is the discipline of strategic stillness. The next time you state your position, your price, or your boundary, shut your mouth. Let the silence stretch. It will feel agonizing at first. Your lifelong conditioning will scream at you to fill the void, to be the peacemaker who breaks the tension. Do not flinch. Let the other person bear the weight of the awkwardness. If you simply hold your ground with a neutral, unaffected expression, they will almost always rush to fill the silence. They will negotiate against themselves. They will scramble to accommodate you. They will assume you know something they do not. Your words must become expensive. They only carry weight when they are rare, deliberate, and final. If you want to carry yourself like the best, you must stop operating like a desperate salesman trying to close a deal. You must become the buyer. The buyer does not pitch. The buyer evaluates. And the buyer does not fear the quiet. Once you stop broadcasting your insecurities through noise, you must confront the invisible leash that was forcing you to speak in the first place. You have learned to endure the quiet, but the compulsion to break that silence stems from a deeper, far more insidious wound. It is the invisible leash of approval seeking. Think about the microscopic fraction of a second immediately after you make a point in a meeting, voice a bold opinion in a group, or even just tell a joke at a dinner table. Where do your eyes go? Watch yourself carefully next time. Your eyes almost involuntarily dart around the room, scanning the faces of the people around you. You're searching for a nod, a smile, a laugh, some external signal that what you just did was acceptable. In that brief, revealing moment, you are not a sovereign individual commanding a space. You are a performer on a stage, anxiously looking to the judge's table to see what score they decide to hold up. This is the physical tether of needing someone else to confirm your reality. And make no mistake, the people you are scanning subconsciously notice it. They feel your neediness. As long as you require the room's approval to feel secure, the room owns you. You have handed the keys to your psychological stability to a random assortment of co-workers, acquaintances, and strangers, most of whom are too consumed by their own insecurities to ever evaluate you accurately. You are giving immense leverage to people who are entirely unworthy of wielding it. Society engineers this dependency from childhood. You are graded, ranked, liked, matched, and swiped until your brain physically wires itself to equate external validation with survival. You are taught that being well-liked is the ultimate currency. But the men who actually dictate reality, the ones who possess an almost unfair advantage in every social and professional hierarchy, operate on a completely different psychological framework. They do not enter a space looking for permission to be there. They practice self-coronation. True Machiavellian power requires you to walk into the room already approved by your own internal standard. You must evaluate yourself before anyone else gets the chance. When you know exactly what your time, your intellect, and your presence are worth, you stop looking around to see if the crowd agrees with you. If they fail to recognize your value, it is not an indictment of your worth. It is simply a failure of their perception. This shift in mindset completely flips the magnetic polarity of any environment you enter. People are violently repelled by neediness, but they are gravitationally pulled towards self-sufficiency. When you stop chasing their applause, when your eyes remain steady instead of darting around for a crumb of approval, you become an anomaly. You become a puzzle they cannot easily solve. Because you are the only person in the environment who isn't begging for their validation, they will instinctively start trying to win yours. The hierarchy instantly inverts. To achieve this, you must ruthlessly audit your daily behaviors. Notice when you soften your opinions to avoid disrupting a group's harmony. Notice when you check your phone obsessively to see how people are reacting to you. Notice when you let someone else's dismissive tone dictate your emotional baseline for the rest of the day. Every time you catch yourself tugging at that leash, you must consciously sever it. You must become completely comfortable being misunderstood, disliked, or judged by people whose lives you do not actually envy. If you would not trade places with them, why on earth are you letting them dictate your self-image? The freedom that lies on the other side of this realization is the ultimate psychological armor. You can finally speak without filtering your words through the anxious, suffocating sieve of public opinion. You can finally make decisions based on what is effective rather than what is popular. When you no longer need their applause, you gain the cold detachment required to see the board exactly as it is. With the blinding noise of external approval silenced, you finally possess the cold detachment required to see the board exactly as it is. And the first thing you will notice is how desperately everyone else is rushing to make a move. Think of the last sudden crisis that hit your workplace, or an unexpected conflict within your social circle. There is always that one person who immediately spirals. They fire off a frantic, emotionally charged email in the heat of the moment, or they send a barrage of defensive text messages to clear their name. They scramble to defend themselves, over-explaining their position, desperate to fix the problem before the dust has even settled. They are operating on a compressed, anxious timeline, convinced that speed is their only defense. Now, look at the strategist in that exact same scenario. They do not reply immediately. They let the frantic energy burn itself out. They watch the chaos unfold, observe who panics, who points fingers, and who holds their nerve. And then, 24 hours later, they make one surgical, unemotional move that resolves the issue entirely on their terms. Acting as if you are the best does not just mean carrying yourself with physical authority. It means possessing an unshakable timeline. The majority of people live their entire lives in a state of perpetual reaction. A problem arises, an insult is thrown, a passive-aggressive remark is made in a meeting, and their nervous system immediately hijacks their behavior. They believe that an immediate response proves their strength. But in the dark psychology of power, rapid emotional reactions are a flashing neon sign of low status. The prey runs the moment a twig snaps. The predator stays perfectly still, evaluating whether the noise is a threat or an opportunity. When you react instantly to a provocation, you are allowing the other person to dictate your schedule. You're handing them the remote control to your emotions and signaling that their actions have the power to disrupt your equilibrium. The world naturally and inevitably subordinates itself to the person who operates on a longer, slower, more controlled timeline. The Machiavellian mind understands that time is a psychological weapon. When you refuse to be hurried, you silently communicate that you are the one in control of the game. You are telling the environment that false urgency does not govern you. You must become the grandmaster of your own reactions. In the modern world, people will constantly try to weaponize false urgency to manipulate you into making poor decisions. When someone tries to rush you into a bad deal, when a client demands an immediate and unreasonable concession, or when a rival attempts to bait you into an argument, your greatest tactical asset is the pause. By intentionally delaying your response, you starve them of the emotional payoff they are seeking. You force them to sit in the agonizing uncertainty of your silence, wondering what you know that they do not. This is the calm, calculating energy of someone who is truly untouchable. You watch them tire themselves out. You do not ignore the problem, you simply refuse to address it until the environment favors your victory. While they are busy reacting, you are calculating. You observe the hidden incentives at play. You ask yourself what the other person is truly trying to achieve, and you map out a response that serves your ultimate objective, not your immediate ego. You let them make mistakes in their haste, and you capitalize on those mistakes at your leisure. But strategy and presence will ultimately crumble under pressure unless they are forged into something permanent. There will come a moment, an inevitable, defining test, where the world decides to probe your defenses to see if your power is real or if it is just a costume. You will face a direct public challenge to your authority. It might be a senior colleague attempting to embarrass you in front of a client, a partner subtly crossing a hard boundary just to see if you will bend, or a sudden failure that threatens to wipe out months of quiet, calculated progress. In that exact fraction of a second, the mask of the amateur shatters. The person who is merely pretending to be strong will immediately flood the room with defensiveness, anger, or frantic excuses, revealing the insecure core beneath the act. But for the man who has truly internalized this architecture, the response is fundamentally different. When struck, he does not bleed defensiveness. He responds with a chilling, unaffected calm. He looks at the insult, the challenge, or the failure not as a devastating blow to his ego, but merely as another piece of data on the board. He simply observes the attack, lets it hang in the dead air, and watches the attacker slowly realize that their weapon has had absolutely no effect. This is the ultimate display of dominance. You do not win by fighting back louder. You win by demonstrating that their best strike was not even strong enough to change your heart rate. This level of psychological sovereignty is not an accident. It is the result of thousands of micro-decisions compounding over time. Acting as if you are the best was never about deceiving the people around you. It was always a covert operation to reprogram yourself. The human brain cannot maintain a contradiction indefinitely. When you consistently choose the physical posture of a champion, when you weaponize silence instead of giving in to nervous chatter, when you surgically sever your dependence on the crowd's validation, and when you refuse to operate on the frantic timelines of lesser men, a profound alchemy takes place. Your internal reality begins to warp to match your external behavior. The performance eventually becomes the man. The shell hardens into an impenetrable fortress. You are no longer pretending to be untouchable. You simply are. This is the final destination of Machiavellian strategy. The goal was never just to maneuver the world into handing you a momentary advantage. The goal was to construct an internal identity so dense, so heavy, and so absolute that external reality has no choice but to mold itself around you. The people who used to overlook you will suddenly find themselves unconsciously seeking your approval. The individuals who used to speak over you will find themselves pausing to ensure they have your attention. They will not understand what has changed. They will only sense that the fundamental gravity of the room has shifted and that you are the one generating it. You have ceased to be a pawn in their hierarchy and have quietly become the architect of your own. Tomorrow morning, you will wake up and re-enter the exact same environment that has historically kept you small. The faces will be the same. The office, the campus, and the social circles will look exactly as they did yesterday. But you will not be the same. You will stop waiting for a permission slip that is never coming. You will walk through the door and claim your space before anyone invites you to sit down. You will speak less, mean more, and let the agonizing weight of your silence do the heavy lifting for you. You will permanently kill the impulse to explain yourself to people who do not possess the authority to judge you. The world does not weigh your worth. It measures your certainty. Choose your certainty. Claim your ground. And if you are ready to stop playing by the polite rules designed to keep you manageable, subscribe to Velvet Dagger. The game is already being played all around you. It is time you finally took your turn.